Hello and
Hello.
welcome. Hello and welcome to the fourth episode. Is
Yeah.
it fourth? Yeah, the fourth episode of the North South podcast. With myself, Andrew Hardwick, and this is the part where I think Dave's frozen.
Yeah, you froze as well. It's come back now.
Okay. Well, this is Dave. Dave's here. Dave is
Hi.
with us. Obviously, today is a little bit of a different episode. Obviously, we've done a few episodes so far on sort of topics. Obviously, we touched quite heavily on constraints. We sort of introduced different elements of skill acquisition. Today, what we thought we'd do is we'd just open it up to some questions. So obviously, we've utilised our massive social media presence to put some questions out there, and we've collected some. But obviously, how before we get going, Dave, how's things with you? How's everything been going?
Good. Cold. A hell of a lot better than if you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago. I've had like a run of being ill, kids being ill. I had like 2 weeks off training, 2 weeks where I couldn't work. So yeah, it's just nice to be a bit more back to normal this week.
Feel like you're living again.
Yeah.
Well,
How about you?
my time was going really well, mate. I was having a nice day. I thought, no, it's going to be a nice, easy Friday. I taught a class this morning. We've had Roan's come up from Wales. So he's been down. It's been good to have him down training for a few days, and then finished the class. Thought, I'll run home and then get set up for this. And then I couldn't find an attachment I needed. I've discovered that Apple, the cunts, have changed the USB on my new iPhone. So we might lose the camera at any point. So if I disappear, apologies. It's also about the time where Bailey starts begging for his dinner. So we've got that to contend with as well. So what started as a nice, quiet, peaceful, sort of quite pleasant day in the north of England is turning into a right shambles. But hopefully it improves as the day goes on.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Perfect. Right. No, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just saying that basically what we're saying is it's really hard. We work really hard, and we're just, you should feel sorry for us.
Yeah, that's it. Real hard day in the office today. Well, we might as well get stuck in. We're gonna get it stuck in.
We'll get started with the good, the bad, and the stupid.
Yeah, the good, the bad, and the
I
stupid.
think we need to just bookmark or bookend this with pointing out that we have a worrying number of followers between us who can't read.
Yeah,
because we put out this Q&A saying that it was about skill acquisition in jiu-jitsu, and both of us got at least one question about strength training, which is fine. Like, that is our job. That's okay. But yeah, it really made me laugh. I was like, for fuck's sake. One of them was one of my clients, and I pointed this out to him, and he was like, oh yeah, sorry, I didn't read it properly.
Yeah, I think people just see a question box and just get really, really excited. It's just like it does. And again, obviously, this is something that you must have experienced as a teacher, that people just don't read the fucking question.
Yeah, that was genuinely a bit of advice I give them before the exam, which was RTFQ, read the fucking question. Because it sounds stupid, but in history especially, like at A level, like half of it is about reading the question properly. You can fuck your exam up by just not paying attention to a word at the end of the question. You finish your answer, you look at it and go, oh shit. And there's nothing you can do because you've just spent 2 hours writing it.
Yeah.
So
I remember those days.
It's interesting watching people not read it.
It is. But anyway, we still somehow we battled through it, and we have come out the end with a few good questions. Again, it's a tough life. But yeah, we've got some good questions. So I think you got two really good ones, and then I got one. So do you want to? We'll go one for one. So do you want to start, and then I'll do the second one, and you can do the third one.
So we'll start with. Are we naming who these came from?
I don't know. Shall we?
We can name and shame.
Yeah, let's name and shame.
Name and shame. Chris Mia, who is also a strength and conditioning coach. And
big up, Chris.
Is he retired or unretired? He's an MMA fighter who's retired more times than I can count.
I've stopped listening to him because every time I go on his social media,
believing him.
Yeah, every time I go on his social media, he can't make up his mind.
We love you, Chris. You'd beat the shit out of both of us. In MMA, I don't know about you with leg locks. I'm staying out of that. But he's asked a very sensible question, which was, can you run both IP and eco concurrently? And I had to ask you what all of this meant, because I only knew one of those words in that question. But it was a good point that he brought up.
It is a fantastic point. And I'll be honest, the answer is a little bit long-winded, to be honest, because it depends on the context.
So should we define IP?
Okay. So IP is internal processing, so that is sort of the technical term for the cognitive approach or the more traditional approach to skill acquisition. In short, the answer is no, because they are, and this is the very difficult thing to understand with this, and this is where you will lose people. Both models of skill acquisition come from behavioral psychology. They are theories about how we as human beings, not necessarily human beings, but because there's a lot of extension into sort of nature and things like that, but how we as human beings learn to behave, or how we acquire certain traits or certain behavioral traits that impact our everyday lives. The way I always explain this is, it's like you can't be a Muslim and a Christian at the same time. They have similarities. They have many belief systems which probably cross over. But obviously, if you're of somebody who believes in Islam, you have, I obviously don't know the ins and outs of Islam, so apologies. There is certain belief systems that you have that are very strict to, whether it's certain ways of, whether it's certain gods or certain acts that happened around certain gods. Or again, apologies if I'm offending anyone, because I'm trying my best not.
I think you slipped at the first hurdle by referring to multiple gods. But anyway,
well, I meant, sorry, between Christianity and Islam, there is obviously two different belief systems. That's what I mean. So obviously, if you're Muslim, you have a certain belief system that's representative of your God and your religion. If you are a Christian, it's the same thing. You have a certain belief system centered around your God and your religion. Now,
and you're going to have aspects of both of those that don't cross over at all. So there'll be, we won't get too deep into it, but for example, if you're a Muslim, you may not know what communion is.
And obviously,
nice simple one for anyone who's ever been to church.
And obviously, Christians don't generally partake in fasting for Eid and things like that. So there's obviously a lot of similarities in many ways, but there obviously is some big significant differences that obviously make them two separate entities.
Yeah,
and that is very similar with this, because it's all rooted in the foundation of how we behave. So the internal processing model is based around preordained actions. So like a central governing system which sort of selects behaviors based on previous experience. Whereas the ecological behavioral model is based on perception. So we either perceive or we don't. And that's what leads to behavior. So when we're looking at it from a true standpoint, it isn't possible to use both models, because
so from a technical standpoint,
no,
you can't run both concurrently.
No.
Okay.
What matters, in my opinion, is I think it's important to have a theoretical framework of belief. Okay, so based on the reading that I've done, I tend to favour an ecological model. It makes more sense. It fits the sport. Based on everything I've read and the people I've discussed with, it fits my sort of perception, ironically, of how we learn and how we develop skill. So because of that, everything that I do from a coaching perspective is interpreted from the framework of an ecological standpoint. So I think what Chris is trying to ask is, I'm putting words in his mouth, but I imagine what Chris is trying to get at is, can you use a more traditional sort of drill X, Y, and Z and then spar 5 rounds versus a more constraint-led approach, which is obviously the ecological system? In that context, I think you can, because it is the information that the way that you're trying to guide somebody towards a behavior still fits within that realm. You're just selecting the way that you're relaying that information onto them and how that changes the context of the information. I think that makes sense, doesn't it?
So tell me if I'm talking absolute shit, but the way that I see it is you've got the theoretical differences. No, you can't run them both because one has to be the model that you accept to be the more accurate theory of the world. But with us living in the real world and not the theoretical world, pragmatically, you can still take aspects of both and use them. It's just that the theoretical framework from ecological dynamics allows you to understand IP in a slightly different way, that you can see why the context still works, why people still learn from it, but you don't necessarily think it means that when something happens, your brain very quickly goes, oh, I see that, and like a little drop down menu drops down and goes, oh, is it this armbar, that armbar, ding 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 ding, which one? I pick the right one. I either pick the right one or I pick the wrong one. And
exactly.
I don't think people who use what would be considered an IP based approach, so that sort of traditional learning approach, would actually think that's what your brain is doing. I think they're much more likely to agree with the idea of, you just interpret what's in front of it and you either the right answer appears or it doesn't.
Yeah.
You either do the right thing or you do the wrong thing. I think the way most people understand how we do things fits the ecological understanding and the ecological framework. It's just that most people don't then apply that in reverse to the way that they coach and the way they design drills, which is ultimately, from a pragmatic perspective, all we're telling people to do.
Exactly. Like, I don't think, like, there might be some fucking knobhead who's gonna come and like start kicking off because that's the way the world works. But like, if you run an ecological framework 80% of the time and 20% of the time you do some static drilling, I don't think there's as long as or for me, everything is contextual. So it's what context is that information being used for? And the thing that I think is important from an understanding standpoint is that, again, I'm not saying you have to pick sides, but having a certain bias towards a certain way changes the interpretation of why you're giving that information. So let's say, for example, a good example of this is if from an internal processing or an IP perspective, cognitive, whatever fucking terminology you want to use, let's say we were working on a backtake, right? So a sequential backtake that everyone gets taught in this way. So we go X, Y, Z, then you do this, this, and this.
We enter the system.
We enter the system. So we're looking here. We're looking at that from the perspective of when somebody is presented with that position, they will repeat X, Y, and Z behavior. Internal processing, fucking hell. Internal processing assumes stability. An ecological perspective would be, let's say we've got a student who is really struggling. So we're like having to like really break it back down in terms of like how we give them information. So what we could look at it from the viewpoint of an ecological perspective is we could use a very similar drill, but the way that we relay that changes it, because what we're trying to do is draw attention to certain elements of that quote unquote sequence of events. We're not trying to go, you need to do X, Y, and Z. What we're trying to say is, let's think about what's actually happening in front of you and why that might not be successful. It's not because you didn't point your toes at the right angle and your thumb was turned up instead of it was turned down. It's what information are you gathering from that external source? And again, two very similar training methods in terms of like how you might use more qualitative information, but it's the end result which sort of changes because we're changing the narrative behind the information. So instead of going, you need to do X, Y, and Z, we're saying, here is a representation of what X, Y, and Z might look like within the context of this environment. And we want to draw your attention to the key points which are occurring that is allowing for success or failure within the position.
Yeah. Essentially, you want them to figure out the answer with help. rather than you telling them the answer and then they can't fucking remember it.
Exactly.
I'm
And
probably wildly oversimplifying it, but this is from the classroom perspective. I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I've been chatting with one of my clients who runs a lot of sessions and does a lot of coaching. And ultimately, I think the point that sits behind all of this is that if it isn't difficult, you won't actually learn it.
yeah,
So it was the same thing with kids who go, oh, I revise best by reading a book. No, you fucking don't. No one does. You revise best by applying it because it's difficult and you get it wrong. And if there is no difficulty, then the knowledge that, or the skill or whatever we want to refer to it as, that you gather has no value. Therefore, your brain does not make the effort to actually file it away properly, because that is a challenging process that also requires extra resources from the body for it to actually put it away in your brain properly. So some people seem to struggle with, oh yeah, but if I go and watch Danaher's instructional, it works. Well, yeah, but if you've ever sat and tried to watch an entire instructional like a sociopath, you don't get all of it. You get a couple of bits, and the bits that actually stick are the ones that you then go and try and apply, and it fails and it works, and you slowly, the struggle is what makes that fit. Having the principles is helpful because it gives you something to aim for. Or you have a specific problem because someone pissed you off at sparring and got you with something 6 times. You go and watch What Do I Do? That knowledge now has value because your ego doesn't want to get caught by that person with that again. So you will go and practice it and you will apply it, and you will remember it because it's attached to that feeling of, fuck's sake, is the probably very unscientific way that I think of it.
no. So another way of looking at it is to do with intention. So the only rationale I can think about really when it comes to, like, because obviously it's a big question in jiu-jitsu, is like, well, why do instructionals work? And again, we have to, whichever side of the fence you sit on, I think what really matters is obviously what your interpretation is. Now, I might think something doesn't work, but that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work. But so the big thing to think about from that perspective, instructionals is a really good example to answer this question. So from an internal processing perspective, what you're doing is taking the mechanisms of a specific movement, repeating that specific action in the hope that when that position presents itself, you can just repeat that specific action. From an ecological standpoint, what an instructional is doing is drawing your attention towards a certain area. So it's not necessarily that the instructional is improving your skill, but what it is doing is changing your contextual understanding of intention or attention to a position. So it's I'm trying to think of the right terminology. What it's doing is it's giving you that it's giving you that affordance. That's the word I was looking for. It's unlocking that part of your brain which perceives an action that then goes, oh shit, I can do that. So it's not necessarily changing the way we learn.
This is what's happening.
Yeah, this is the goal. Do you know what I mean? And that's where sort of merging what you would look at from a similarity standpoint in terms of the way that we present information is that's it's the context of how the information is being used that truly matters. And I'll give an example from an ecological perspective. So obviously Greg Sanders is the sort of the big fronting figure for the ecological approach in jiu-jitsu, and his big thing is his students have never statically drilled, okay? Which I'm not here to question whether that may or may not be true. I'm inclined to believe it is true. However, I am not going to believe that his students, and he's never said this, by the way, I'm just trying to make a point, his students have never watched jiu-jitsu. So they're not, I'd be willing to bet that they're not, once they leave that gym, it's not like, oh, jiu-jitsu doesn't exist. They'll still be watching matches. They're still taking in information from external sources. It's still changing their affordance. Like, there's no way. This might be a limitation from me, but watching some of his guys compete, there is no way that that's a purely emergent behavior. There's no way. Like,
well, you'd be stupid not to, because
yeah,
you'd be behind the curve in terms of trying to make it emerge.
yeah. So it's
Because why wouldn't you prepare for your opponent?
exactly. So again, that's still information that is sort of descriptive in nature, for want of a better word, because it's a prime example of how an action can occur. What
But
they
they've still got to
do,
go and apply it.
yeah, they just then take it into an environment and apply it in a live setting and apply
Yeah,
contextual understanding of the principles behind what's going on, because they already have a good
yeah,
base from all the sort of training that they already do, so they can just go, all right, well, that's just that they're the principles. I'll just apply it.
yeah,
So again, it's this is where it gets a bit lost, because if any, do you know what? I'll make a bold statement. If any ecologist is saying that information from a descriptive standpoint is bad, they're talking shite, because their students are getting information. It's not, there's no way, unless you're literally doing one-on-one live training with two beginners who have got fucking no idea about the outside world, they are
they live
taking
in
in
a cave.
information. Yeah, they're taking in
Yeah,
information. Every time they log on social media and some dickhead's doing some flash shit, or you're watching highlights from the trials, or whatever it is, it's
yeah,
information, whether you like it or not. All that information does, from an ecological standpoint, is direct attention, which impacts perception, which impacts affordance for action. That's the way
yeah.
that they differ.
And really, all that matters then is that you go and apply it and
Exactly.
practice it and see if it works in a setting that is either live or quite close to live.
Exactly.
Because the further away from live that it gets, the less, again, drilling on an unresisting partner is largely a fucking waste of time after probably the first 5 reps of something
100%.
completely new that you've never done before, because it's just too low. It's too easy. Okay, right.
My question.
Spent a while on that one.
Yeah, no, it
Yeah,
was
your
good.
turn.
It was good. I hope that answered your question, Chris. I imagine Chris has got a pretty good understanding of this anyway. I imagine he was asking the question to be nice and give us something to talk about.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, Chris. So the next question was from a friend of both of ours, another friend of both of ours, which is a guy called Mike Plevin. Plevin, I think we've had this conversation before. Apologies, Mike.
I think it's Plevin.
I think it is Plevin. And obviously, Mike is sort of interested in this. He trains. I think he's got his own gym at home, I think now. But
Yeah, he does.
he asked the question of how does one go about applying the constraint-led approach on their own, which is probably an episode for itself, but we're going to do our best. Do you have anything to say on this?
Just to check, by on his own he means just with a single training partner,
Yeah,
without a coach.
Yeah. He's not like lonely wanking on his own at the couch, like
he's not all those guys in lockdown with the
chairs and
berimbolo
shit.
a chair. Yeah.
But okay, so
we're doing Danaher solo drills.
So this is actually an interesting question, because this is, I mean, it's something that I've been putting a lot of thought into from a coaching perspective, and Dave, quite kindly, has been trialing the system for me. So this is something that we've been working on. Now, I will preface this with, I don't know how to do it in the best way, because it is quite difficult unless you have somebody. I think the problem with the ecological approach is it requires a lot of thought. There's a lot of nuances to the different ways of thinking about things. So that a lot of the ecological, or the constraint-led approach, I should say, is based off principles and heuristics. It's not based off specific elements of technique. Now, the biggest thing that we have to do, like with the last question, is we have to understand that ecology is not associated with simply skill acquisition. It is going on all around the world in everyday life. That's the basis of ecology, is it again impacts how we as human beings, as mammals, behave.
Yeah.
So once we understand that, we understand that everything we do then falls into this ecological. It's not like opening a door and you go, oh, that was internal processing. Like it's all one action. Like it all falls under the umbrella. Okay, so based off that, that takes the pressure off a little bit, because then that's how live training works, because it is ecological in nature. It's success, it's failure, it's representative. It's got a good challenge point. It's all this blah 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 blah. the difficulty is creating constraints. Now, a really simple way is you follow the traditional jiu-jitsu approach of, not traditional jiu-jitsu, like the traditional jiu-jitsu approach of, you pick something for the session and you go and work on it. That still has value to it. I mean, I would say it's limited, but you could, if you like didn't want to do any thinking about it, you could do that. So, to give an example, I'll give a personal example. When I started the journey into this sort of objective constraint led approach training, what I did was, obviously I hadn't heard of ecology, I hadn't heard of any of this bullshit. I just literally was like, I know that what I'm doing doesn't work, I need to figure out a way of getting better. I made a massive list of like all the submissions in that I wanted to play or needed to be good at, and it was like, right, positions that I need to be good at, and I put them in a random list generator, and before every session I'd spin the wheel. Right, today I'm working omoplatas and mount, and there were my focus points.
Yeah.
Get to those positions, finish those positions, which is great if you have the technical ability to get to those positions. If you're going against guys that aren't going to let you, or you're not good enough to get to those positions already, you're just not going to get fuck all effective training, because you're just going to get twatted. So it's like, it's all well and good having the intention of working for omoplatas. If you can't get to them, then it's pointless. So what we have to do, and this is my take of it, is create games and objectives that you can play personally. And the way I put it is, you can play games without your opponent know you're playing games. That's the way I like to think about it. So,
and this is what you've done for me.
Yeah. So the way we've done it for Dave, I'll give you an example. So Dave obviously was come to me and he was like, right, I want to improve on my leg locks. So I was like,
no. My first words, let's be completely honest here, were, Andrew, can you make me not shit training once a week?
Okay, there you go.
Because I had been filled in at an open mat by some very good competitors and was feeling very sorry for myself, and realised I needed to get my shit together and actually start approaching this a bit more sensibly. But yeah, go on. I just don't want anyone thinking that I sounded more professional than I did.
So what we do and what we have been doing is, I'll create games for Dave based off things that he can do within a live round. So an example of this, so week 1 was, all I want you to do, Dave, is in every position that you're in, try your best to get both of your feet on the inside. So for anyone who doesn't know the inside essentially is, you can look at it various different ways, but essentially it's the center of the body. So both feet in between your opponent's legs. Okay. So regardless of whatever position you're in, you can play this game, because if you've got guard passed, you've got an objective and a goal to work towards in terms of like regarding. If you're in attacking position, it's right, let's get it, let's control it, let's use it. Now, what we're not doing is limiting the game of grappling. So I'm not saying, right, Dave, I need you to grab Jeff and Jeff's going to do X, Y, and Z, because when you're doing it on your own, you have to understand that not everybody wants to train in this way. Not everybody wants to come to an open mat and go, "Hi, mate, I'm going to put you in a triangle and I just want you to defend." Like, some people are like, well, fucking not doing that.
Yeah.
So we have to work off principles. So obviously a big principle of leg locks is winning the inside. The battle of the inside, from both a top and bottom position. If you want to defend your legs, get good at winning the inside position. If you want to attack legs, get good at winning the inside position. We feed back, we chat. Obviously, if you're doing this on your own, you wouldn't have someone to feed back to, unless you want to pay me some money. Then we go, right, did that work? Yes. Why? If it didn't work, why did it not work? What opportunities arose? And the interesting thing for Dave was within week 1, it was like, oh, it's interesting how much more butterfly guard I was playing, or how much more half butterfly, whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? Like, these various different positions. And what we're trying to do is use generalism to promote specificity, because there's only so many ways to do things. There's a reason why butterfly guard is an extremely effective leg locking position, because it's the inside. It allows you, again, we're talking about invariance. So all these games are like based off invariance. So leg locks, you need to win the inside position. You need to gain control. You need to create distribution from a weight perspective. So generally speaking, you need to get your opponent's hands towards the mat. Then you need to create establishment control at the hip and then start to break down from that perspective. So it's like we can build games off this. Dave can still play these games and his opponent hasn't got a clue that he's playing them because they're still involved in the game of grappling. If Dave gets to a position to pass, he's still going to pass. That's the idea. We're still live in the round. If Dave sweeps it,
I've got my leg out of position, I better put it back.
Yeah. That we're not doing that. We're still playing the game of grappling. What we're doing is just giving him games to work towards. So another example, another one of my clients is we're doing some work with him, and he wanted to work on his sort of guard retention. So it's like, well, what invariants rely on guard retention? So it's like contact points, keeping your opponent in front of you. Again, we could look at like destabilization of his base, all these various different things, and we can build games around them. So it's like, if you want to improve your guard retention and you're doing this on your own, what does that rely on? So again, keep your opponent in front of you, maintain 3 points of contact at all times in terms of gripping. You can then specify a little bit and you can say, draw your attention towards specific joints, i.e. ankles, knees, hips, wrists, elbows. And you can start to build a format of games that, again, if you get past, it's not the end of the world because the game doesn't finish, because your objective is to then work back to your opponent being in front of you and you having 3 points of contact. Dead simple game.
Yeah.
That seems to be the best way that I've found to do it. In terms of like really structured, objective-based training.
So from my perspective,
this will be interesting.
Because I'm training at an open mat, it's if you're training at home, you can obviously have a chat about that a bit more, but it's nice to do it in terms of sparring because one, it's a much more live environment. You get very immediate feedback about what works and what doesn't, because the other, your opponent isn't going, oh, well, they're working on this, so I should. Your opponent's just going, right, I just want to win. So I found that very helpful. I very quickly, like I was talking to Andrew earlier, actually, we were talking about the last session, having had 2 weeks off was rough. I managed to play butterfly guard and very quickly realized that if someone's sitting back and heavy on your feet, don't try and pull them in because they'll just slide into mount. And that's quite a hard lesson to learn when you think you're ego-wise. It's quite a hard lesson to learn when you go from having had some success to total abject failure, where you're like, this is entirely my fault. I've chose the wrong solution. So I would say that it probably works. There's probably a bit of a learning curve to applying it. And there's probably a bit of, I don't know, there's almost like an aspect of ego that you need. You need enough ego that you're stupid enough to keep trying it again and again, or maybe a threshold for frustration. And
the fuck scale.
Little enough ego that you can laugh. Yeah, the fuck scale. But little enough of an ego that you can also laugh at yourself when you absolutely fuck it up. Because I think for me, some of the things stand out more if I'm not frustrated, if I just find it funny. Because as I pulled this guy towards me and he just slid into mount, I just started laughing and he was like, are you all right? It's like, yeah, I'm just a fucking idiot. Don't worry. And it's how you're going to approach it. For other people, it'll be frustration that drives that. But I think there's probably a psychological aspect to working out how you can cope with that. Was it like 60% success rate is the top end
around
of what
that? It's like 60,
for with this?
60, 40, 70, 30, something like that.
Yeah. I'd say I've probably hit some points of 80-20 where I'm just 20% success, 80% failure. But it depends on what you're willing to put up with.
Yeah, of course. And again, one of the actual recommendations that I make for people is you don't do this every session, because there is a difference between we can talk about cognitive load, we can talk about all that sort of boring shit that people probably won't take much advice on, but like simply from the perspective of if you do it too much, there is a difference between skill and performance is massively important, and skill is massively important. They overlap, but they're ever so slightly different. So the way I always explain this is skill is relative to outcome, So it's a sort of application of a task within a contextual environment under variability. Performance is simply fail or success. So an example of this is like, so I'll use you, Dave. Dave could quite easily, if I was like, right, Dave, we're going to work on defending your legs. I want you to win the inside. It would be very easy to, let's say, beat the knee shield, pummel a leg on the inside, get body to body, and just fucking sit there. Technically, you've won the objective and you've won the round. But you've not actually developed any skill. You've performed well because you've done what you needed to do, but your skill of integrating that into the context of an actual pass, or what if someone regards, or how to apply this in many different contexts is very limited. So it's trying to separate that skill versus performance. But I'm a massive believer of there is times where you should show up and fucking have it. Like just play the game. Like switch off. I think and go.
That's the other that cuts into the other variable as well of adherence. And I think that's the people that we tend to fall out with or not enjoy the perspective of is the people who are like, it must be this all the time. This is the only way to learn. And you can tell that some of those people either, one, don't give a shit about how many people attend their classes, or two, don't really coach anyone, or coach a group of people who have nowhere else to go. Because if people aren't enjoying the training, they're not going to fucking come. And it's the same thing with this. If you were to just do this all the time, like you said, not only is it to do with how performance and skill acquisition work, but what's the point in any of this if after 3 weeks the person's like, fuck this, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
It's so I found it really refreshing that you're like, if you don't find yourself in either of these positions, then just play the game. Like, if I'm starting from, I have some rounds where I pull to guard so that I can start playing it. I've got some rounds where I know people are going to pull to guard, or we just play a short takedown game and go from there. And then there's other times where the back presents itself from standing. I'm like, well, guess it's not a round where I do this then.
Yeah, and that's it.
That level of variability is nice.
And you have to.
But I only train once a week, so.
To go back to oh shit, my camera's going to go here because I need to plug my laptop in. Apologies to anyone who's actually watching the video of this, but this will be an audio section from now on for me.
You just have to put up with looking at me.
Unless it stays on, it might stay on. This will be interesting. It stayed on. I don't know how it stayed on. Anyway, so the thing. When you're looking at it from, obviously the question, obviously there is a lot of different specific variables we could talk about this. Obviously situation plays a massive factor in this. But if you're somebody who is doing this purely on their own, then I've forgotten what point you made. You made a really good point then, Dave. I've completely lost.
Adherence.
Adherence. Oh, yeah,
so
that's
having that variability.
So like it's, if you're doing this on your own, it is difficult. It's not easy to like be properly like constraint led on your own. So you're trying to create situations like, yes, it might be more effective if you were like, if Dave went into training and was like, right, 5 rounds, I'm gonna work from the inside position. I want you to just attack my legs. But because he's on his own, he doesn't have that opportunity. So it's important to recognize when you're doing this purely on your own that just because you haven't spent as much time in the position as you wanted doesn't necessarily mean you've got better. You've not got better because you've still worked within the game of grappling. So one of the things, like obviously for Dave only trains once a week, so what we're trying to do is not give him too much to think about. So if somebody trains 4 days a week, then it might be like, right, on Tuesday we're going to have this as our objective, Thursday we're going to have this as our objective, and then the other 2 days I just want you to do whatever you fancy. So we can create a bit of undulation, we can create some randomness through the training. Obviously the example that we're giving, Dave only trains 1 day a week, so it's very difficult. I can't be like, right, Dave, this round you're going to do 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 this, because he'll just spend all day running to his fucking phone going, right, hang on a minute, right, I'm doing this, and this, and it's just like, it's just not effective for developing long term. It's not effective for adherence. So again, it's like anything. It's like strength training. It's like finding a solution that fits you and your schedule and your brain power, whatever it is. Like, it might be that when you first start doing it, because it is difficult, it's not easy to stay on task. It takes practice getting used to this way of training. It might be that you just do it once a week, and the other days you just roll and do what you'd normally do.
Enjoy yourself.
Yeah, enjoy yourself. Then you go to 2 days a week, and then it might be like, right, I'm going to do 3 days a week, but I'm going to make sure I keep one day. Like, when I was, obviously I'm not training at the minute because my body's on its ass, but like, the way I worked it was I would do sort of 2 days a week. So I'd have 2 days were like skill-based sessions where I'd like have objectives. One day was a performance-based session where I'd be like, every round is world finals, like I'm going to go for it. And then I'd have one day, which you can call it whatever you want, but essentially I was just fucking about. So it was, and obviously that's just me. That's how I like to do it. That was what my brain allowed me to do. So, and it's about finding a way of doing it that works best for you. Some guys might be like, if obviously the old sort of autism and steroids joke, guys that maybe are a bit more like able to manage their expectations session, you might be able to do it 6 days a week. But like somebody who's a bit more like me, who's a bit more impatient, they're a bit fidgety, a bit like probably sit closer towards the ADHD side of things on the spectrum, your attention span doesn't last that long. So it's like, well, something has to change all the time, because otherwise I'm just going to be like bored and, oh, fuck it off, I don't want to do it anymore. So it's difficult. It's not an easy answer. The best way I found it is through that, is creating games that you can play without your opponent realizing you're playing them. And they can be as simple or as complex as you want. So an example I've used, again, one of the ones that I used to play was like, if I'm in a top position, my sole objective, wherever I am, is to keep my opponent's shoulders flat on the mat. And that's obviously a key concept of pinning your opponent, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to pass guard. It doesn't mean I'm not going to go into various different situations. If you can think about the context of positions that relates to side control, mount, chest to chest, close guard, like all these different shit, I can still play that. My opponent doesn't know he's playing it. He's just having a fucking bad time because I'm squishing shit out of him. But like, I'm just playing that the whole time. I'm working on my pins, but I'm still contextually within the game of grappling, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Cool.
Perfect.
Right. What's the next question? I think it's you did Mike. Sorry, it's mine. So this comes from Cathol. I've probably pronounced that wrong, which is embarrassing. Relatives from Ireland, but there we go. He asked. He actually does my Get Strong Roll More. So he does my subscription training. Yeah, and he asked this in the group actually, and then he's asked it on here as well. About transferring game plans from gi to no gi, because he's found, much like me, that when you take the gi off, suddenly half the stuff that you really like and rely on isn't fucking there anymore. The grips aren't there. You're reading everything wrong. For me, it was like classic half guard. I'd just go, oh yeah, I'll just sit here, and all that happens is people backstep you and knee bar you. So it's a difficult one, because you have to recognize that some of the stuff that you really like to rely on just isn't usable anymore. But how would you go about doing that?
It is a difficult question to answer, to be honest. So the interesting thing is, I've not really thought about this approach much in the gi, because I don't teach gi classes. It is something that is interesting, because obviously it even though it's the same, it creates different problems. Obviously the principles are very similar, but obviously rule sets, clothing are all constraints that change how a person interacts. Now, in an ideal world, from a coaching perspective, you build a game plan based around key crossovers. So instead of relying specifically on lapel guard in the gi and specifically leg locks in no gi, you build a game plan which crosses over both. Or you develop your understanding of the similarities between the two. Interestingly, this is an interesting point. I actually believe so. We've quite openly slagged off the sort of differential learning approaches that we've seen on social media. I actually think cross training in terms of gi and no gi is quite a good element of differential learning because of the constraints and the impact it has on how you do things. Now, in terms of building a game plan, that is a tough question. Now, I don't know how he grapples. I don't know what he does. So I can't.
Yeah.
It's very
so
difficult
I can give you a little bit more context.
Okay.
You can tell me if I'm an idiot or not, but what I opened with was what are you? So here we go. What is your gi game, and what do you feel that you're struggling with in no gi? And then what broad or specific areas are you struggling with? Like, is it guard passing? Is it? And that gave me a little bit more information to work off. So for him, he basically. Sorry, I'm just running through it again. So one of the key things was that the guards that he likes in gi are either spider lasso or De La Hiva, if that's not there.
Of course,
that's going to be difficult to transfer to something.
Yeah, you fucked it.
Yeah, like for me, I love I love collar sleeve.
I've always
Strangely,
played. I've
it's
always
not really there.
I've always played half guard, so I've never had an issue in either. So obviously,
fucking love half guard as well, but I found that very difficult to transfer.
So obviously, the examples, unfortunately, they don't cross over really at all.
Yeah.
The example of where like separation, again, to use the religion example, there are similarities and there are differences. The similarities, the differences. The examples you've given are very much the differences in the game, unfortunately.
Yeah. So the just to give you a bit more, the other area that he did say was difficult was initiating grip fighting. He found that generally he was on the back foot, and that one makes sense again because if you're used to establishing specific grips on the gi, then that's something I found quite difficult in those initial grip exchanges. Also, not to let him get away with it, some absolute half guard slander here. He said, "I prefer to work into a guard that isn't as last resort as half guard." Absolutely disgusting. Half guard is the king of all guards.
I'll do an episode on that alone if we want.
So all that I suggested for him was based off the kind of thing you've been suggesting for me. I said I gave him some stuff that he can go and look at, but I said I just let's have a look. Sorry. I said you've given yourself your focus. Like, spend some time denying grips and establishing your own. Just play that game. Find out what ones are good and what ones are shit.
So based off that comment, that's what I would say from that perspective. Is like, so again, similarities. Not all humans, but generally speaking, all humans have got 2 arms and 2 legs. The difference in how we control those doesn't change. What changes the material that you grip. So a gi gives us a greater affordance from a gripping perspective because it's material, it's friction, and we can make solid grips with less effort because we don't worry about sweat. We don't have to worry about anything. We can easily make like a hook grip on a gi top and hold on to it. But the point of reference of control doesn't change. You're still making grips within an elbow, the wrist perspective. So again, off the top of my head. So again, games that you could play, depending on the position. So a game I always like to play is with people is, regardless of it's a bit of a weird one, this one, but it might fit quite well because it gives that little bit of affordance. Is regardless of the position you're in, can you stop your opponent putting their hands on you? So it's creating a goal of fighting a grip without me going, you have to go and fight the grips. Because again, grip fighting sometimes can give specific connotation. Now, if we can set an objective within that grip fighting battle, as in like, don't let them put their hands on you, or you could say, again, the inside position, you can quite easily use the inside position for hands as well. It's something that I've done with guys from a wrestling perspective, because it's so important winning a wrestling title. You could use that as a format. So again, can you keep your opponent's hands off you? Can you win the inside? Two very specific ties. Now, again, however you want to contextualize this, another example could be, again, this is where a bit of personalized coaching comes in, because it's then, does that constraint work for that person? Can we word it in a different way that gets the behavior that we want? So, another example could be, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. It's put me on the spot a little bit. This. So, could it be like, can you get 2-on-1 grips and maintain? A bit more specific. So, can you make 2 points of contact on your opponent's arms and maintain that position?
Well, so interestingly, after just saying, just focus on the initial exchange, deny what they want and see what you want. He said he started using a lot of 2-on-1, a lot of arm drags, and a lot of throw-bys to get to the back. And I haven't done anything there. Literally all I've said is, I've asked 2 questions. What are you struggling with? And then, well, why don't you just focus on that? And it's sometimes I think it's about giving people they almost want the permission to do a thing that I think people who are very good naturally do. They tinker, or they experiment, or they play, or they go, right, well, you want those grips? Well, fuck that then. Let's just take them. We've talked about before. My friend Josh says one of the biggest problems in jiu-jitsu is that people accept the position that their opponent puts them in.
Yeah, and we're lazy. Instead
of just like going, inherently, right, fuck off, I'll stand up and...
Inherently, we are. It's jiu-jitsu generally, for the majority of the population. The dog's going fucking apeshit here. The jiu-jitsu population. I'm scared of moving. There you go. There he is. Hello. Let's see what he's heading. The majority of the jiu-jitsu.
It's not a proper episode if we haven't had a cameo.
No. Come here. You just see a nose. The jiu-jitsu population, we are quite inherently lazy because of the game. So, like Roan, one of my clients, has been up training with us for the past couple of days, and this morning we were talking about like guard, and he was saying from like an MMA perspective that they're like, obviously MMA fighters are in. It's just drilled into them. It's like, if your arse hits the ground, you work back up,
get up.
Whereas jiu-jitsu players, our arse hits the ground, and we go, oh, like, fuck for that. Can I have a minute here? Like, and it creates different perspectives of grappling. So we are inherently lazy because of the sort of nature that the world that we live in. So it's about, again, like I said, intention affects attention, and that's all we're trying to do. And again, it's obviously when it comes to obviously answering Cathal's, apologies, mate, if I've said that wrong. Cathal's question.
I'm sure we both have.
They're obviously when you're trying to build a game that works with both sides of the equation, gi and no gi. Obviously, you want to try and build a game around similarities. So, like, you're trying to build you're trying to find stable solutions that fit both ways of doing things. So, like, there are certain things that cross over really well. 2-on-1 grips is one of them. Arm drags, etc., are things that you're being a pain in the arse, pal. That cross over really well. Certain guards, half guard, for example, the principles generally cross over really well. So obviously, if from a direct perspective of how do you build a game around gi and no gi, well, you have to build a game off similarities. You can't build a game off differences unless you've got the ability to go, right, when my gi's off, I'm going towards Bailey, fuck off. I'm trying to like give a good answer, and the dog's going fucking ape shit. Lie down. You're trying to build a game off similarities, not differences. Obviously, unless, like I said, unless you've got that ability to switch attention when you put a piece of material on or take a piece of material off. Now, it and again, like I said, there's similarities, but it's again, if you're not aware of the similarities, so that's what my advice would be, is to spend a little bit of time drawing up or sort of starting to develop your understanding of the similarities. So like where is that crossover? Where are the control points that work really well? What are the positional focuses that work really well? Like it doesn't matter whether you're in the gi or no gi, being able to get to someone's back and control someone's back is always going to be a really, really effective skill to have.
I think
if that makes
I think you're making a really nice point, but there's something from one of the Danaher DVDs, but he does a section on how no gi differs from gi before he starts to get into, I think it's the like new guard one. I can't remember. I've watched too many bits and pieces of too many different things to actually remember it properly. But he does go through why no gi, what makes no gi so different, why it feels so different for a lot of gi players. And one of the points that he makes is that he says the same thing about 2-on-1s and things are closer to what you would expect from some of the more traditional gi grips, because the gi grips immediately give you a lot of control.
Yeah.
He uses the example of like, if you've got the collar and sleeve, you have control of that entire hand. They can't bend it. So you've essentially got what's it called? I can't think of the name of it in no-gi, where you've got the wrist and behind the tricep.
Oh, like a Russian tie, like a
and you can extend their arm. He said if you've got the good grips in no-gi, you can essentially put those two together, and you've got control across their shoulder because the gi goes behind the back of their head. So you've got way more control than it is possible to have all at once.
So this is
in no-gi.
This is it's getting,
and it'll stay
dark.
there longer.
This is an interesting point as well. So it's getting dark as well, mate. It's fucking pitch black. Anyway, living in the north of England.
It's grim up north.
So the example I always use whenever we're looking at points of control is in the gi, your affordance of control is at range. So we can gain control of, to use posh terminology, we can control center of mass at the end of a limb. So like you said, if I make a collar and if I make a sleeve grip, I can establish a pretty good control of someone's body from like rotational standpoint. In no-gi, we have to, the closer we are to the center of mass, the more control we're going to gain.
Yeah.
Which is why if you look at like wrestling,
that's why you can't play collar and sleeve guard, essentially,
because you've got no control. So like if you look at wrestling,
you just fall off.
Wrestling is all underhooks, overhooks, front headlock, like the ties, the attachments you make from a no-gi perspective are all close to the body. So the closer we can get to the body, the more control we're going to have over that individual. Whereas in the gi, we can work from range. Like if you put both feet on your opponent's hips in no-gi, he's just going to push them off. Whereas if we can make good control from a range perspective, i.e. end of joint control, it gives us more affordance from that perspective. So that leads quite well into to advice for I'm not even going to offend him by saying his name again, but it's again, how can you draw similarities between the two? So how can you build in gripping? We continue on the term of gripping. How can you use gripping strategies that afford control both in a no-gi and a no-gi perspective? So again, 2-on-1s work perfectly well. Arm drags, you've got like obviously underhooks. Underhooks are a fantastic example of gripping strategies. Do you know what all those three grips can come from, Dave? Half guard.
King of guards.
King of guards. But yeah, so like again, it's when you're looking at building a game, to give a direct answer to the question, is you obviously want to base a game set off similarities, not differences.
Yeah.
Again, we could talk about spinning plates and all that shit and getting better at specialization, generalization, stuff like that. But again, it's about similarities. It's not about differences. That's obviously without knowing the guy and spending time with the guy. I can't really give.
So I guess it's look for similarities, but accept differences.
Yeah, 100%. Not be afraid. Don't be afraid of differences. Like, there's a reason why leg locks work exceptionally well in no-gi. There's a reason why spider guard works exceptionally well in the gi. Like, I'm not saying that you have to reject differences, but obviously if you're trying to merge the two, like again, use like, I don't know, 80, 20, 70, 30%, 70 to 80% you want similarity, and then the 20 to 30% comes from the differences that you can apply, so that when your gi top comes off, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference in terms of how you apply it. I always think that's the best. Obviously, the more you do of either or together in a week, for example, the better you're going to get at both of them. It's if you're like traditionally a no gi guy and you're like, right, I'm going to put a gi on, that's when that like learning curve is going to be different, because it's like I always say, when you've had a period out of the gi, it's like running in sand. It just saps that energy and that sort of inertia, for want of a better word. It's like
no matter
that kills momentum.
How many good decisions you feel like you've made, you can be absolutely fucked by a grip you didn't realize happened
100%,
like 3 moves ago.
100%. Yeah, so hopefully that answers the question. Apologies, it's not the best answer to the question, because obviously it's a bit of a difficult question to answer without knowing the person. But
But I think we've given people a process.
Yeah, of course, 100%.
Because it's going to depend on what your game is.
Yeah, 100%. Like, funnily enough, I've just put a presentation together about game models. If anybody wants to see that, I'll send it you. But and I won't even charge, because I'm a nice person.
He just wants your email.
Yeah, no, I don't actually want that. I'm shite at emails. But yeah, so I'll happily send that across and hopefully try and give people a little bit of context on that. Ober Hansen, actually, shout out Ober. He's got a really good one as well. And I'm sure if you ask him very, very nicely, I think he offered it out a while ago. And I asked if I could see it, because I was interested in learning about it, because obviously Ober comes from a footballing background. Obviously, football there, understanding of data and analytics and the use of that sort of stuff is really, really much more in depth than combat sports. And it was really good. So if anyone's listening, I'm sure Ober would politely let you watch it. If not, pay him some money.
Okay, you said you had one more question.
Say that again. Sorry, mate. I
think you've got the last question.
Oh, the last question was a shit one, wasn't it? So the last question was the strength conditioning question, which was, what are the best transferable exercises for grappling? So we weren't going to answer this. I'll not name him, but I'm going to give him some shit when I see him for not reading the textbook. Anyway, there are no best transferable exercises for grappling. Easy answer.
Yeah, general strength training that doesn't. I'd say the only caveat that I'd put on that is, if you're doing a lot of jiu-jitsu, you don't want a lot of shear load on your spine.
So axial load.
We do plenty of flexing and extending. Exactly. We don't want. You're probably going to be better with a front squat rather than a back squat, or a safety bar squat rather than a back squat, a trap bar deadlift rather than a traditional deadlift, an RDL rather than a traditional deadlift. But it doesn't mean you can't do any of those things. It's just that the wheels might fall off a bit quicker if you're doing lots and lots of axial loading and you get lots and lots of shear force on the spine, because it will fatigue you. That's all. It'll just tire you out.
And I think, again, like general recommendations, a bit of balance. Don't spend all your time bilateral squatting. Don't spend all your time unilateral squatting, obviously, unless you've got some physical limitations which prevent you. A bit of balance is both. A bit of balance is great. Obviously, the general recommendations: squat, hinge, push, pull, carry. You could add some degree of jumping onto that as well.
That's the bit that people are usually missing, is hops, jumps.
Yeah, hops, jumps,
throws, if you want to chuck them in as well.
Yeah, I think obviously. I was just going to say, obviously, being aware of how much volume you're doing. Obviously,
again, most of my clients, twice a week. That's it.
Yeah, twice a week. 2-3 times a week.
3 times a week if you don't have very much on.
I am like.
The biggest thing is, don't fuck it up.
Yeah, don't fuck it up. But like again, and one of the big things I will say is find things you enjoy doing. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. Like, strength conditioning coaches can be extremely serious about what they do. Sometimes too serious, to be honest with you. And like,
Yeah.
I'm quite a serious person. I take what I do very serious. But sometimes, like, when you see the arguments, obviously most people won't be privy to that because it's only us sad cunts who are looking at other strength conditioning social media pages. But they just like enjoy yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you like Bulgarian split squats and you don't want a back squat, that's fine. Like, it's
Yeah.
not the end of the world. Pick movements that you can progress, you can load, you're happy doing with consistently. You can adhere to them at various different loads, various different rep ranges, and at various different tempos. Like, it's not.
Probably tending towards, I would argue, generally tending towards higher intensity and lower volume, just to reduce the amount of interference with doing lots of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But
Like,
even then,
again,
there's
it's
times where you'll be able to do more. Like
yeah,
bicep curls, fucking have a
yeah,
way,
have a
go
way.
for it.
Like, and again, it's I don't like these questions. Like, this is why I don't. I mean, you're similar to me, Dave, but like, this is why I don't post any of this stuff on social media because for me, everything is contextual. Like, if you're
Yeah.
training jiu-jitsu twice a week, so like the old adage is like, and I adhere to this as well. If you're training full time, generally speaking, high intensity, low volume. But if you're
Yeah.
training jiu-jitsu twice a week, a bit of volume in the gym ain't going to kill you. So it's like
Yeah.
it's contextual. Like, it's dependent on
Yeah.
the situation. So that's
Sleep, life
sleep.
stress,
Yeah,
all
sleep.
the stuff that makes us sound like every boring strength coach
Yeah.
ever who goes, it depends.
Yeah, find
But that's
every
why it
cliche.
depends.
Yeah, find
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
cliche in the book and fucking write it on a wall. Like, they're cliches for a reason. Like, it's a boring answer
Yeah.
and it's a shit answer, and everyone wants you to turn around and go, "Oh, searcher squats are the best thing for grappling," and it's just like it's just not the case.
So that I think that's an important point. Is if someone tells you what are the best exercises you can do to translate to jiu-jitsu, they're either selling you something, so fair enough, and if it's a
Yeah.
service and it's good, I don't have a problem with that. We've all got to make money. If they are putting these up as some kind of performance improver, then like just fuck off. That's not true.
Yeah. It's not true.
There's ways of marketing that are ethical, more and less ethical. And there are people out there who genuinely think they have the answers to how it transfers. Now, if you discuss what transfer actually means, if we're going to get really fucking specific here, the reason I get so annoyed with people who say, oh, this translates to the mats really nicely. Right. General training, which is what we're suggesting here, which includes jumps, which includes lifting, it includes fucking bicep curls, all of those push, pull, hinge, things sensibly put together, an appropriate number of sessions, all of that all translates nicely to the mats. What
But
doesn't happen is there
probably
isn't
not in the
some
way that
magic
people think.
exercise you're not doing. Exactly. But there isn't some magic exercise that you're not doing that is missing. And someone who suggests that to you is preying on your insecurities to sell you something, because there is no way of measuring if something transfers to the mats that isn't, did you feel better? Yes, cool. Because it's not like where people talk about transfer and specificity and all these like magic words that make strength coaches sound like sports scientists is only really appropriate in sports where there's one measure for win or loss. So if you've got a thrower, yeah, we can start playing with what are specific exercises for them, going up the lovely hierarchy of special developmental and yada, yada, yada. That works if the outcome is, did you throw it further? Or if it's rowing, did the boat go faster? If the outcome is nothing to do with that, then you can't have specific exercises for transfer. The sport is just too chaotic, because you could accidentally produce the perfect thing that transfers perfectly, and then your client goes in, competes against someone else, they sit to guard and leg lock them in 6 seconds.
Yeah.
All of your magic transfer meant fuck all. So you've got no data to know whether it has improved them or not improved them, which is why general strength training is what you need for a sport like jiu-jitsu. If it's MMA, you can get a little bit into the weeds in it, because we all know fights start from standing and you can win by a knockout or from a kick or a punch. So you can start to play a little there if you want to at short periods just before the fight. But it fucking winds me up when people prey on this nonsense to go, oh yeah, I've got the magic solution for blah, blah, blah. You fucking haven't. And the fact that you claim that you do either means you haven't read enough or you don't care and you're trying to make people buy your shit by lying about things. Yeah, I'll get off my soapbox now.
I was going to say, and breathe. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Dave summarised it pretty well. Again, it's... I don't know. I don't think I need to add anything, to be honest. I'm just going to fucking waffle more shite on that topic anyway. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, there are no specific direct transferable exercises to grappling. The only thing that is directly transferable is grappling. I mean, I'm extremely opinionated on the place that grappling fits within the spectrum of performance. And I will quite happily argue the toss with any strength coach who perceives themselves to have any real importance in the development of skill within an athlete. And I'll also argue the toss with the conditioning side of things as well, to be honest. But we'll save that for another day.
We're singing from the same spreadsheet.
Yes. But again, we'll probably not. We'll leave that one there. Just leave it because we will be here all day. But yeah, so hopefully that was the first Q&A episode that we have done. Hopefully it answered some questions. We do appreciate your questions. As always, their doors are always open for questions.
If they're the wrong topic.
Even if they're on the wrong topic. Me and Dave are... I'd like to think we're quite nice people and we'll always try and help to some extent where we can.
We had a really quick one. I can't remember if we talked about this before. We had a really quick one from Rick from Reap, where he asked what our favourite positional rounds were. And I'm just going to summarise our discussion when we talked about this a couple of months ago, because we were supposed to do a Q&A ages ago. If you have a favourite positional,
don't do it.
It's probably time to stop doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's no longer providing you any value. Because if it's favourite, it probably means you're winning all the time, which probably means you're quite proficient there.
That's
or
not
your training partners are wrong.
That's not a quick
and not
question.
Challenging enough for you.
I can physically feel the output, the outburst ready to come off the back of that question. But yeah, we'll just, because otherwise we will be here all day. We will just summarise with that exact point. If you have a favourite positional round, it is time to change positional round, or it's time to do something else that makes your life much more miserable from that position.
Yeah.
But so as usual, if anyone has got any questions, any feedback, we are always open for it. Thank you all for listening. Again, this is a bit of a passion project for myself and Dave. So the fact that people do listen is very humbling, and we appreciate it a lot. And obviously, as usual, like, subscribe, and all that bullshit.
Yeah, share it with your friends. Send it to other people. Listen to it in the car.
Yeah,
make your nan listen to it.
Yeah, I've not even asked if you don't listen to it. Just play it because it's good for listens, and it makes me happy when I open the Spotify app. But yeah, so appreciate it. And hope you all have a Merry Christmas.
We will.
I was just wishing everyone a Merry Christmas.
Be busy. How's your Christmas? Well, yeah, I know. I'm everyone.
It'll be quiet, mate.
I wish everyone else a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I do. But yeah, so my
You're
Christmas,
just slowly sinking into the darkness.
I am, mate. It's just getting darker and darker. And problem is, I don't want to get up and turn the light because I'm chatting. But it's I'm just trying to get closer to my MacBook so everyone can see my face. But yeah, anyway, we should probably
if
leave
people don't already, if you found us on here, you can find us on Instagram's probably the easiest place. Yeah. Andrew is at Brotherhood Performance, or if you just put Brotherhood Performance in, and then I'm at Foundations Performance. So we're both imaginative boys.
We are, yeah.
Yeah, and follow us on there. You can ask us questions, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah,
perfect.
Right. Happy Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. I hope you have a lovely New Year as well. On. Yeah, I will do. I need to feed this dog. You'd think he'd never got fed before. It's like a starving child sat next to me. But yeah, Take it easy.
Cool.
See
You
you,
too,
mate.
mate. Bye.